Alright, this is one of those ones, kind of like when we had, like Horrible Bosses and Swimming with Sharks and 9 to 5 and all of them last year, where Office Space, where it kind of felt like there were so many different movies that could have been paired up together and we weren't sure what was going to go where, so we just kind of ran with it. There's probably a lot that could have happened here, but when it came to my attention that we needed to go more in Vietnam, the first movie that just immediately jumped out to me was Stripes. They're not exactly alike by any means, and there are a lot of movies that would go with Stripes as well, probably more so. But we absolutely had to do Good Morning Vietnam, and I thought this was the best way to do it. I thought, which is not, to say that this, is not a good pairing. I think they go together fine personally, but I don't know, whatever everybody else thinks. But We'll start with let's start with Stripes, actually. This, of course, is the Ivan Reitman, Bill Murray, Harold Ramis gathering prior to Ghostbusters. This was 3 years before, in 1981. And when I was very young, I got a birthday present from my dad, which was 2 VHSs, and they were Ghostbusters, the first Ghostbusters, and this.
That's cool.
And I had not heard of this before, so I checked it out and was brought into that world. So, it's very, it was the year after Private Benjamin came out, so there's kind of like that, where we have, John Winger and Russell Ziske, one of which, has just quit his job as a cab driver, and the other who is a basic English teacher. And once they realize they're at dead-end points in their lives, they decide they're going to join the army. Because, why not? It looks easy enough from the commercials.
Besides, his brother's a cool man.
Yes. We'll get to that.
Yes.
So he convinces Russell to sign up with him, and hilarity ensues. It's basically been compared to, some people have said that you could have basically put the same characters from Animal House in this scenario, and it would have basically been the exact same movie. Which I can totally see. Like, the only thing this movie's missing is the National Lampoon's logo. But no, the teaming of Reitman, Ramus, and Murray they're totally different monster. With Ramus, obviously, is also a credited writer on this. One of the things that obviously makes it stand out is this is one of the first times we got a really big glimpse of what the kind of actor that Bill Murray is. Where you can write for Bill Murray, you can write for Bill Murray all day. You can write an entire script devoted to Bill Murray. But when that camera rolls, he's going to do whatever the fuck he wants, and it's probably better than what you wrote. And that's pretty much what he's done ever since. Like everything I hear, pretty much. I think the only time he absolutely follows a movie exactly by the script is when he works with Wes Anderson. I think that's about it. Because like, as you probably heard, like, when he read the script for Rushmore, he actually almost did the movie for free, but, like, SAG wouldn't let him or something. But he was just going to do Rushmore for no money because he loved it so much. And that really, really shines through with this character. This is easily one of his best characters, and one that's not nearly talked about enough when you talk about his great ones. What was his name in Caddyshack? Carl Spackler, I think. John Winger's head and shoulders above a lot of the characters that he gets a lot of credit for. And he's actually a real, like, he comes off like a real person, too. That's something that Murray really, really brought to this. Like, when he's at the beginning, and he's at his absolute lowest, he's lost his job, his girlfriend, his car, his apartment. Everything is gone, and depression is setting in. Those are his exact words. Elmer Bernstein's the composer, and he actually has a little theme when Winger's in his apartment by himself. And it's this really perfect melancholy tune that plays that just fits the whole thing really well. You don't see comedies that have, like, appropriate scores that often anymore, especially comedies as, broad as this one. Another thing you'll probably notice watching this is, despite the fact that this actually predates it by 6 years, It's basically a comedy version of Full Metal Jacket. That's like exactly what it is. And Full Metal Jacket was 6 years later. Where we have, he goes, and one of the thing it has mainly in common with Good Morning Vietnam is you have this guy who's just kind of pushed into this situation, and Stripes, you say this kind of loosely, but at a time of war. And he basically is able to push his way through his time in the military using his sense of humor. But that is cut short by Sergeant Holga, who is Warren Oates. And I gotta tell you, Warren Oates is, like, award-worthy in this movie. Like, he is right up there with Early Army and Full Metal Jacket and Louis Gossett Jr. and An Officer and a Gentleman. He just happens to be in a comedy. But he's playing the character totally straight, but still has that sense of humor about him. Like Arlie Ermey is playing the part totally straight in Full Metal Jacket, but gets the biggest laughs in the movie. And it was just really, this was one of his last movies too. Like, the year after this was released, he had a heart attack and died. But this was, like, a really, really good role for him, despite the fact that you probably remember him most for stuff like The Wild Bunch and Badlands and stuff like that, Dillinger. But he really owns this part and really brings something that the movie probably would have fallen apart without. But that's also to say, to compliment the rest of the cast too. There's a lot of familiar faces who weren't that familiar at the time when this came out. Well, first off, Harold Ramis gets some really good moments too, because he's playing the straight man to Winger's comedic character, but he also has a lot of Harold Ramis finds this brilliant way to make the straight man just as funny in different ways. I particularly love his delivery at the beginning when they're signing up, and they're going through all the basic questions, and the guy says, "Are either one of you homosexual?" And Ramis' response is, "No, we're not homosexuals, but we are willing to learn." And then, and just watching him, like, in the backgrounds of scenes, he's always kind of doing something that you can kind of watch out for. It's worth noting the villain, I guess you could call him the villain of this movie, is Captain Stillman, who is John Larroquette. And I don't really know what Stillman's deal is, but you will notice he is a truly bizarre character. There's really not a whole lot to him. He just hates what they're doing and wants to keep them in basic training. And when we see him doing things apart from that, he's just doing really weird shit. And it's really funny when you read about it. Supposedly, John Larroquette claims that when he was shooting this movie, like 95% of his scenes, he was drunk when they shot it. There's the scene where he's watching the women shower through a telescope and says things like, "I wish I was a loofah." And he has like a toy battlefield with action figures that have like actual pyrotechnics. The moment I love when he just in like a fit of aggravation, he pulls the pin out of a grenade, and instead of like putting it back or trying to stop it, he just hands it to his aide and just leaves it at that. The little thing where he salutes downward. He just added so many things to this character because he's not in it very much, but he really establishes this guy that kind of sticks in your memory. And like I said, by the end of the movie, he's pretty much the villain, more or less. And then we have people like John Candy playing Ox, who's like he's basically if Del Griffith were in the army. He's the guy who's except Ox is more aggressive, but he's the big lovable guy that everybody knew John Candy as, and that's that part. And he's really, this is like the first time we kind of saw him in that role, I think. With the is there a movie on this flight line and stuff like that. Another person you want to point out is Judge Reinold, which brings us to an interesting point of discussion, which is you'll notice that Judge Reinold's character is a paranoid stoner. And the reason for that is because instead of Bill Murray and Harold Ramis, a very early version of this movie was supposed to star Cheech and Chong. This was supposed to be a movie for them. And all their dialogue was just given to Judge Reinold. And the characters were shaped to be Murray and Ramis as we see them now. So it's fun to watch his character and think of that, and also he just kind of pops in every now and then, but he seems to always be doing something funny, just with the type of character he's playing. And it is, I guess, bringing that up, it's worth noting that there's it was a deleted scene in the original cut, but if you have this extended edition, this director's cut, there is a whole scene that's about 10 minutes long that was completely cut out of the movie, where Winger and Russell are going to get on a plane and kind of just go AWOL and get out of here because Russell has just had enough. And he thinks that Elmo has given him Dramamine for the flight, but it's actually acid. And they end up in the Colombian jungle. And they get taken prisoner, and they end up in a skirmish. And then they finally end up back. And I believe that's actually the reason. Because it seems kind of out of place in the movie when we get to that scene where Holga is trying to call out people that were basically doing something they weren't supposed to, or trying to get away. And I think that scene is what he's actually referring to. And what I love about this moment in particular, when Russell steps forward and Winger doesn't, he kind of tricks him into doing it, is we have this scene with Holga and Winger in the bathroom that's a confrontation between them that we've been kind of waiting to happen because they've been at odds since this started. And this is when the movie kind of this is the most serious scene in the movie. It's kind of really the only time the movie does anything like this. But it's at just the right time and at just the right moment to where it really fits in just right. Where they have a really serious moment where Hulk actually legitimately offers to let Winger hit him, but he ends up knocking him down instead, and that's kind of, the respect is kind of there for more so than it was for the first half of the movie, and you kind of get, the characters kind of have an understanding with each other, but at the same time it also shows that Winger now realizes that Hulk is the one with the authority, and it doesn't obviously keep him in line by any means, but there's something that kind of changes between the characters for the rest of the movie, and I really liked that the scene's in there. Now there's some little things to look out for that are really great too. One of the moments being when Winger is putting the old lady's luggage in the cab, and he hits himself and says, "Oh my God, my balls." Apparently that's something that really happened, and that was Bill Murray's reaction to it, and Ivan Reitman just said, well, that's going in there. So it's always fun to watch that scene now. And like I said, a lot of the Murray improv stuff. Apparently the whole scene where they're introducing themselves and giving their backstories was improv. And watching Murray do his thing in this particular scene is great. And there's the scene where Alex is telling his story. And it's the guy, there's this guy, I don't even remember if he gets a line or not. He's the guy that Winger refers to as Lee Harvey, but I don't know that we get his real name. I'm sure it's there if you look really fast, but I don't remember that he gets a line, but if you just kind of watch him throughout, there's one particularly great scene where, just this moment where Ox says something, and he's trying to get the room to laugh. And we just cut to this guy for a second, and he's totally stone-faced. And we have no idea for the rest of the movie who this guy is. He's just there among them. So I always like looking out for that character in the background. And then there's, like I said, there's those moments where when there's a special when like Ox is telling his story. Obviously, Russell doesn't want to be there, doesn't really like anybody he's coming in contact with, so when people are talking, you can, like, see him making, like, over-the-top gestures at them as if he's listening to them, or, like, he's mocking them as they're talking to him. He does it with Ox, and I think he does it with Elmo before they leave. So it's fun to look out for that stuff. And there's also just really tiny things hidden in there, like the fact, if you look hard enough, you'll notice that by the end of the movie, Stillman's 8 has been promoted. you can only tell by looking at his uniform, but it's just this kind of thing they threw in there after all the shit he was put through throughout the movie. And having said all that, there is a point in time, and I'm sure everybody who has seen the movie knows where I'm going with this. There is a moment. Okay. Even Ivan Reitman is not pleased. So whatever that tells you. This movie could have reached, like, absolute greatness. Like, this movie could have been one of the all-time, you know, famous comedies ever. And there's a lot of people that really, really love it, for sure. And among the right crowd, it is considered a classic, undoubtedly. However, to me, the one thing, and to a lot of people, to my understanding, the one thing that really, really keeps it from greatness is about the last half hour. When they actually... It's kind of mirroring going back to Full Metal Jacket. As much as I love Full Metal Jacket in its entirety from beginning to end, but most people will tell you they love the boot camp stuff, they don't like the war stuff. The movie takes a dive when that happens. That's the case here. To my understanding, Reitman said that it was, I guess it was like a studio thing. Like, he had assumed that nobody would want to see a movie like this unless it eventually got to the point to where they were put in the middle of a war. So he just kind of had to do that for the third act, more or less. So they end up in, like, Czechoslovakia, and there's the whole EM50 thing and the Winnebago, and the movie's just not what it was when that stuff hits. And it's obvious that they just kind of were like, you know, well, we kind of have to put this in here, so this is what that is. And there's really nothing particularly memorable that happens in that entire time frame. Like, once the graduation ceremony ends after they've done their thing, you kind of just want to skip to them, like, getting off the plane, and that's how it is. Like, the graduation was the climax, I guess. But, you know, I think this movie could have been stretched to the point that, where the whole movie was just getting out of basic training. That was kind of the big thing, but I guess they had to go to war for one reason or another, and that's what it does. And when they throw in the P.J. Souls character and Sean Young's character, the military police that they end up having love stories with, that just kind of feels thrown in there, and those characters never really found any interest with me, so... Yeah, there was definitely something here. And yeah, like I was saying, we were going to probably do this within the Army Now, have the Good Morning Vietnam not come up, because this in the Army Now pretty much lifted stripes completely. Mm-hmm. And I was telling you, I'm not sure who would turn out for a Pauly Shore movie. I don't know, but so yeah, there's definitely greatness in this movie, but it's. That last half hour or so is a killer, unfortunately. But while we have the greatness, that's great. So that's what that is. With Good Morning Vietnam, this is a Barry Levinson movie, and this was his first Oscar nomination, actually, and a very, very well-deserved one. This movie is actually really tragic to watch now. There are 3 people in this movie that had their lives cut short now. Because Robin Williams is in it, J.T. Walsh is in it, and Bruno Kirby's in it. All 3 of those people are people that should still be here. And of course, as you probably know, this is the story where it's, I think it's, I can never remember if he was a real person or not. I've heard that sometimes, and I've heard he's like kind of a composite character. I don't know which one's the truth or not, but he's in the Air Force, and he is brought in to kind of liven up this radio show, and he's working with Robert Wool, and he becomes buddy with Forrest Whitaker, and he basically finds himself here doing this Good Morning Vietnam routine, where he basically does a giant stand-up routine in relation to what's going on in the world, and everybody loves him except for the authorities. This is literally Private Parts set in Vietnam. It's exactly what it is. Where you have J.T. Walsh and Bruno Kirby's characters trying to get him off the air and stop doing what he's doing and do a more kind of Walter Cronkite type thing. But he's always finding ways to overpower their authority with his gigantic personality. So as you can probably guess, Williams is perfectly cast, as he's basically playing a stand-up comedian. And he's even doing a thing where he kind of... People were talking about when the tragedy struck in Williams' life, that it was like he was wearing a comedic mask, but he was really... We don't really know what was going on inside him, but it was something bad. And you can tell, looking at Cronauer's character, that he is that person where he is constantly being funny, because it's like he doesn't want people to know what's within him. It just, everything he does, everything from picking up the Vietnamese women to just hanging out with Forrest Whitaker and his new friend, the girl's brother. He's just constantly on all the time. And then, of course, the movie will find points where he's not on, and that's when you realize just how skillful this performance is. Where he can do the... Obviously, he could have done that in his sleep. The whole broad, constant comedy character that can go for 4 straight hours on the air without stopping. And then when there's serious moments hit, he's on them just as effectively and just as, you know, really putting it out there. So this is also one of the movies that's really... kind of adds to the whole tragedy of it, where it's one of the more painful ones to watch in lieu of the tragedy, because you think of like the Genie and stuff like that, and these performances where he was just really all over the place, but this was him at like his absolute most energetic in this part, because that's what the part was his energy personified within this character. Yeah, because I think I remember hearing something about the fact that the only inaccuracy the movie has in regards, like, a big inaccuracy the movie has in regards to it is, the guy that he's playing wasn't near as, like, funny and broad. Mm-hmm. So, but apart from that, it still gets the point across. Even when it's scenes where, like, he starts teaching the class, teaching an English class is another thing it has in common with Stripes, by the way. He's just constantly on fire in this movie, whether it's comedic or dramatic. But then, like I said, there are those scenes that really hit. Like, for starters, there are those moments where it's like, you can tell that he's improving. That's much like Murray's character. You can tell when it's just kind of him doing it, and very rarely does it even seem like he breaks here. There's one moment... the really great scene where he's putting on, like, an impromptu show for those soldiers. And he, like, blows up a condom, and it gets away from him. And he says, like, it almost blew up in his face. Like, there's, like, one moment there where you can kind of see, like, I think that was Robin Williams that came out. But other than that, he's just constantly lost in this character. But like I said, he's more or less kind of him also. So... It was really a great character for him to personify, but then you get those moments where, like, he can't really get his act going after tragedy strikes when the restaurant blows up, and he just managed to get out of there, and he sees the bodies and the damage and everything that's done. Then the stuff that he can't see from inside the booth when he's on the air. And it's this really great scene where he's trying... J.T. Walsh has said, you can't talk about that explosion. You can't let anybody know that you know what happened there, or that even happened. So he goes in and he's trying to do the Good Morning Vietnam put on. He's trying to get in that mode, and he just has to keep stopping and starting because he can't get there. It's like trying to start a lawnmower. He just keeps trying to get there, and then he keeps coming back down. That's a really, really great scene. And that really shows that he can do both when the time calls for it. It is a movie that kind of reaches over length. It's only 2 hours long, but there's a lot of stuff here. Like, there's some stuff that, like, in any other movie, the love story probably would have seemed like just tacking onto the runtime, but it's kind of a sweet story when it's happening, and it adds to the plot of her brother being what he is. But then, you know, like, when it gets to the goodbye scene, it's almost like the movie's kind of calling itself out when the guy's like, I think he's going to say goodbye to everybody in the country before he's leaving, and they're playing baseball and all that. But regardless of that, it's still, obviously the movie couldn't really go anywhere unless you put kind of a seemingly last-minute storyline into it, so we can kind of come to a climax before he has to go back. But, so I get why it's there, and it kind of helps. It helps, you know, show the change that he goes through throughout the movie. And we get to, you know, he gets to show off those dramatic parts of it. Because you can probably look at it and say he got an Oscar nomination for pretty much being himself, being the comedian and stuff like that. But I think it really came from the way he was able to do those dramatic scenes towards the end of the movie. and how he was sometimes able to kind of lightly inject comedy into the really dramatic scenes, like the when he talks about how his best friend is who her brother is, and he screams, "That will not look good on our resume," and stuff like that. This was kind of the first really big example we had of what he could do in both aspects, on sometimes their grandest level. So I think this is definitely a good representation of who he was and what he could do. But we also have some really nice supporting roles here with these actors that you always recognize but don't really have the leading parts. Like I mentioned Bruno Curry and J.T. Walsh. There's also Richard Edson is there. Talking about Bruno Curry real quick. There is I actually really, I mean, you're not supposed to like his character, and I certainly don't like his character. But I really like this performance. Because he is a guy who like absolutely positively believes within himself that he is a funny person. And when we actually get to see his act, it is the most agonizingly painful thing. This is just a guy who has no idea what he's doing. And the thing about it is, when we finally see him do his thing, this is what I love about the character and the performance, is we see finally what he's been talking about the whole movie, about how he thinks he is a comedy god and knows exactly what he's doing. He's got the horn and the voices, and he's playing polka music. And when he finally just bombs terribly, just horribly, you expect that he realizes it and he's come to terms with it. But no, as soon as he's off the air, he looks at them through the glass and folds his arms and asks for an apology. It's like, you can't help but love the character regardless of how much you're supposed to hate him, and you do. And that's definitely a testament to how Kirby betrayed him in his performance as well. So yeah, I think the story itself kind of only exists to propel the idea of showing his change, really. It's really not a movie that's heavy in the story department, but the whole purpose of it really is to show us this character and show us just how larger-than-life he can be and how larger-than-life Williams was. And yes, it's definitely a movie that really, really brings forth how huge of a loss we had. Forrest Whitaker is also very good here as well. So let's talk about how great Forrest Whitaker is for 2 seconds. Of these two, I would pick Good Morning Vietnam over it, because while the story kind of takes a bit of a dive when it kind of, tries to have a story, I guess, it still holds itself together. Whereas Stripes, that last half hour, just kind of sticks the movie. So, but it's still really great when it's on, though. Everything from Graduating Basic Training and back is fantastic. Just try to. A lot of people like that Colombian jungle scene, but if you can, I'd stick with the theatrical cut. This extended cut has a lot of scenes put in it that kind of slow the movie down. So I'd stick with the original cut if you are choosing between which one to go for. But of these two, it's Good Morning Vietnam for sure.
So ends another edition of Versus, and next week we will end Robin Williams' theme of the last 2 months. And we're going to have some interesting times. It should be a really good way to end, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, you'll see.
Yeah, it'll make sense. It'll make sense, trust me.
It's certainly not considered his best movie by any means.
No.
But it feels appropriate.
It feels extremely appropriate. And
you definitely know what it is now.
Yeah, without a doubt. So that's what we've got for this week on Versus. Hopefully you're enjoying the Halloween Horror Nights content that we got in great abundance the next couple weeks and what we've had already. By the time you watch this, I will have already experienced Halloween Horror Nights on 3 nights. So those videos are currently up right now to check them out. Check out AJ's movie reviews from last week. Check out Gaming with Ash. We should have a couple of those up here and all the other regular content here on Pop. Got some new sipping snacks coming up, so stay tuned for that. So that being said, I want to thank you guys and girls out there for watching. AJ, any parting words?